Good morning on this Sunday, May 12th, and a happy Mother's Day to all the moms watching. Here's a look at our top stories on the Georgia gang. Let the legal challenges begin for Georgia's heartbeat bill signed into law this week by Governor Brian Kemp. The Georgia Supreme Court takes up guns in the Atlanta Botanical Garden. The decision could have a far-reaching impact. And former Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed is the commencement speaker at his alma mater, and not everyone is pleased with the choice. Phil, Alexis, and Theron are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Hello, everyone. This week, Governor Brian Kemp made good on a campaign promise by signing the so-called heartbeat bill into law. Opponents say they'll make good on their promise to file suit.
Through the Life Act, we will allow precious babies to grow up and realize their full God-given potential.
I have one message for Governor Kemp. We will see you, sir, in court.
With the stroke of a pen, the legal battle begins over what is now one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. The Life Act, also known as the Heartbeat Bill, will ban almost all abortions. The governor and other supporters celebrated the historic day inside the Capitol as a coalition of activists protested outside. The ACLU says it already is working on a legal challenge to what they believe is an unconstitutional assault on women. The bill sponsor says Georgia's law is different than the ones struck down by the courts in other states. Georgia's version makes the fetus, once the heartbeat is detected, a person that must be included in the state's population and can be named a dependent in tax filings.
I don't want to predict what the courts will do, but I can tell you I believe if it does make it to the Supreme Court, this bill lays the legal foundation that we would want.
The ACLU says it plans to file suit by the end of summer. This is going to be quite a long legal fight. Phil, is this the issue that Republicans should be focusing on going into 2020?
Well, there are two issues. The legal one, as we just saw in the video package, and then the second is the political, which I think you're asking. I've always thought that maybe this bill might have been used as a test case, ultimately go to the U.S. Supreme Court and to do a Roe v. Wade decision. But on the other hand, you have other states doing this too. I don't know if it'll be found constitutional, but that's for the courts to decide. Politically, as we know, the Republicans hemorrhaged seats in suburban Atlanta last year. I'm going to, again, look in the future. I don't think there's any more seats to lose, perhaps. They want to try to retake some. I think they're going to have to shift focus on various issues like health care and other pocketbook issues in the economy, because and certainly in suburban areas it's not going to help some Republicans.
But it will help in the rural areas and with the evangelical Christian crowd. But Theron, what's your take on this? I mean, it's a long legal fight. 2020 is just around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, clearly this is something that Governor Kemp was proud to sign. He campaigned on it, but I think it's going to motivate Democrats. And I think what you saw from Stacey Fox, who runs Planned Parenthood here in Georgia and also in the Southeast, they've already prepared to go and fight this legally. Also, I think Attorney General Carr is going to somehow be involved in this as well. But I think that this is going to play heavy in the upcoming elections in 2020. So I've talked to Republicans, Lori, who are worried that this heartbeat bill issue is going to not only fire up their Democratic opponents, but also they think that they may lose some moderate, suburban, and rural women. I've talked to some folks down in South Georgia who are rural women Republican voters who basically have said that they didn't think that they should be limiting women's rights, and they look at this as unconstitutional. So this is going to be a big issue in the upcoming 2020
And
election.
Alexis, this is an issue that draws out both sides. I mean, if you're going to draw voters to the polls, this is the one issue that will draw them.
Yes, but I think many polls have shown that most people are in favor of the ability for a woman to have an abortion if she wants one, or if she thinks she needs one, as opposed to outlawing it altogether. Even nobody, as I've said many times, nobody wants to have an abortion, but sometimes it's a choice that you're left with. And I think that politically it's going to be a hard row to hoe to get people to criminalize women and criminalize doctors and physicians. And making this such an early 6 weeks heartbeat bill, as they call it, is just really tantamount to banning abortion altogether. And if you have the exceptions there, you have to file a police report if it's incest or rape. Who's going to do that? I mean, people are embarrassed in the first place, especially if it's a family member, and then, you know, it's just going to make it really difficult.
Phil, I don't know if the polls show what Alexis is saying. It is a divisive issue, but I think, you know, a lot of folks are split, down the line on this too.
Well, there's no question it's one of the most divisive issues in politics in Georgia nationally. But the flip side of the coin is the far left is actually driving moderates and independents, or whatever you want to call them, over to Republicans. They may not totally agree with all the Republican issues, but the fact that the hard left of the Democrat Party wants third trimester abortions, that's pretty radical. We do know this. The polls indicate that the large majority of Americans don't want that. So if they want to capitalize on Republican weakness with abortion, they're doing it the wrong way by keep talking about third trimester abortions or abortions of birth.
I don't think people are saying that.
Oh,
there may be one or two on the fringe, but most people don't say that, because people who get abortions get it as soon as they can, as early as they know.
But the
it's a
fact that
problem.
the Democrats were talking about late-term abortions, and you heard the Virginia governor, you saw what happened in New York when they were celebrating the bill signing, I think that did really motivate Republicans to say, let's get out and do something.
Well, Republicans are, look at what happened in Alabama. I mean, you had a shouting match between the state senator who basically brought up a motion for the bill to pass. And if that bill would have passed, it will eliminate abortions altogether in the state of Alabama. And so Georgia is right there, it's 6 weeks. But no, listen, I think that Stacey Fox and the Planned Parenthood and some Democrats have been very methodical to say, look, we want to stand on the side of women. And it's not all women, but there are a lot of pro-choice women out here that want to have control of what they decide or what they want to do with their bodies. And so therein lies the messaging. No one is really attacking the right for doing something that we knew that they were going to propose when they came to the session. I think the message is going to penetrate to the moderates in the middle, and there lies where I think the Democrats are going to be able to probably capitalize.
Right. I also think that Andrea Young, who runs the ACLU here, is biding her time and not going to rush into court to challenge this, because it is a complicated issue. And
yeah, they're going
Laura,
line by
you're
line.
right, too. That image of these Democrat lawmakers in the New York State legislature cheering and clapping for third trimester abortions, you can bet that that's going to be an ad. And of course, you have radical lawmakers right here in Georgia that are calling for, we need third trimester abortions.
All right, let's go from abortion to the NRA, two controversial subjects. The new NRA president, Carolyn Meadows, issued an apology this week after she said the reason Congresswoman Lucy McBath won the 6th district wasn't because of her stance on gun control, rather because she's a minority female. Congressman McBath was quick to respond, and Theron Meadows actually apologized on this.
Yeah, Meadows, it was just pathetic. I mean, to attack this woman who we talked about last week, who lost her son due to gun violence. And I would believe that Congresswoman McBath is not against the Second Amendment. What she wants is to strengthen the gun safety and gun control laws in this country. Democrats and Republicans believe that people who have mental disabilities, people who have a criminal background record should not have access to get these guns. And so what you saw is that I think that this woman from the NRA, who I think that pathetic was very weak. I mean, her apology was very weak. It should have been stronger. It fueled Lucy McBath's campaign, because her campaign was not about just gun violence. I mean, she talked about healthcare, she talked about education, but she beat a congresswoman in a Republican district that Tom Price once held, Lori, that was one of the most conservative districts in Georgia. So to say that she only won because she was a black woman, it just shows you how clueless and how insensitive and ignorant these white people who support the NRA at the leadership of the NRA, how insensitive and how ignorant they are about politics in Georgia.
And Phil, isn't it more difficult for an African-American female candidate in the 6th district because it has been Republican for so long? Really, she overcame, and she was able to win.
Lucy McBath won, and of course, the Republicans, we don't say we're not going to, honor the election. We go along with election results, unlike Stacey Abrams or liberals. But I think that's a terrible generalization against whites that you just made.
The leadership
that's
of the
terrible.
NRA.
I think
leadership of the NRA.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
No, I'm not ashamed. She should be ashamed. Are you going to denounce what she said about Lucy McBath?
You're never going to be happy with any apology from any conservative or Republican. So, if you misspeak, and if we do it on this show, we apologize.
She didn't misspeak. She said what she said on
I
purpose.
don't know. You don't know that.
I saw the quote.
We've all fumbled in terms of our speaking abilities and talking points. So, either accept apology or don't. That's up to you. But I think going back to your point, I think gun control is going to be an issue. I mean, we're a carry state when it comes to firearms. You can have your certificate and you can have your permit, and we have a lot of hunters in this state. So I think it's a double-edged sword. If you want to talk about it, there's a lot of. You've heard me say this. You go to firing ranges. There's a lot of women that want to practice.
And is that? But Lucy McBath won.
Listen. Our elected representatives in this state have mandated that we're a carry state, and I know you don't like that.
So do you support what the NRA president said about Lucy McBath in her statement?
Oh, I think she should have apologized.
Okay, so you don't support it.
But you won't accept it.
So no.
You won't accept it.
I
think it's a legitimate issue, though.
I think that she should have never said it. I mean, this is the NRA we're talking about. We know that they are the backbone of the Republican Party nationally. They give majority of their money to Republicans. And so for you to not come over here and basically condemn this woman.
Well, there are many fine NRA members, and a lot of them are Democrats.
And I know a lot of them.
Roy Barnes, your buddy, was endorsed by the NRA. But anyhow, the point is, gun control is the issue in that suburban district, just like around the state.
Well,
and I don't think
was a big issue too, and Lucy McBath had a very passionate story because of the death of her son.
And she only won by 3,000 votes. It's going to be tight.
We are going to wrap it up. Coming up, the Georgia Supreme Court will weigh in on whether guns should be allowed at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. We'll discuss coming up.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
The Georgia Supreme Court heard arguments this week on whether the Atlanta Botanical Garden must allow gun owners to bring their weapons onto the ground. So this issue is public versus private property because the Botanical Garden leases land from the city of Atlanta. So it's not just about the absolute gun issue, but we're talking public versus private, Phil.
That's right. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is a carry state where if you've got the permit, you can go in a lot of places. It is a tricky issue. You just pointed out, is it public property or is this leased property? And so is it state property? Everybody knows the Botanical Garden is private. I think it's tricky. I don't know the answer. I noticed the justices were asking some very pertinent questions about how does this affect leasing property, and
could have some far-reaching
so they're
impacts.
Very good. Yeah, it has far-reaching impacts. So I'm not smart enough to know how the court's going to decide on this one.
Theron?
Well, you saw people from the business community. I think the Metro Chamber of Commerce, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, came out and basically said that this will wreak havoc on a lot of private businesses, not just in this metro area, but all across the state. And so I don't really see how the judge is going to probably side with Evans in this case. But I think that, we're talking about the Botanical Garden. This is a place where families go and look at beautiful flowers. I mean, they have wonderful events there. And so again, listen, no one is trying to take away a person's Second Amendment right to carry guns, but we just got to really make sure that we are really having a sensitive conversation that makes sense about where these guns can be allowed.
Well, some nut can break into a beautiful garden. I mean, I don't know what the point is with that.
Well, that is,
I think it's going to hinge on the lease. It's going to hinge on private versus the lease.
And I think that it should go with the private sector because they own the park. And
they lease the land.
They lease the land, but they own
yes.
the business of the park. So they should be able to set the rules.
All right, in the small town of Houston in Jackson County, controversy is brewing according to the AJC, which is reporting the mayor turned down a job candidate because he was black. And then, while being interviewed about the subject, a city councilman said interracial marriage was against his Christian beliefs and made his blood boil. Alexis, I want to get your take on this because you've been around a few years. Is this a surprise at all that this is 2019?
No, unfortunately, it's not a surprise, but I hate to see it. You would think that people would have evolved over time and come to a different understanding. And it's just really sad to see that they have these opinions and that they're in positions of public policy to make rulings and to deprive people of employment and do other things that could impact their livelihood.
Phil, a lot of folks before this have never heard of Houston. This really put Houston on the map this week, and some are calling for the resignation of these officials. Should they resign?
Well, it's understandable. I mean, first of all, obviously, anyone's up for a job under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You cannot discriminate to a job applicant, so that's clearly outrageous. All of this is pretty outrageous. I do think a lot of these two folks haven't apparently evolved, obviously, but I think a lot of people are evolving, and I think it's a good conversation to have because obviously we can't have this in this day and age. I mean, you've got also, reverse discrimination against whites. You talk to lawyers, and there's a lot of.
Come on.
Oh, the lawyers will tell you. The lawyers will tell you they make a mint.
Discrimination is discrimination. Reverse discrimination is not a thing.
The lawyers will tell you they're making a mint when it comes to reverse discrimination against white cases in Georgia and elsewhere. It's wrong. All of this is wrong, and I think we ought to condemn it wherever we see it.
Theron.
Yeah, this one actually is really just sad. I mean, this is a county that's very near Gwinnett County. I've heard of it. Want to make sure I get the pronunciation. Yeah, Jackson County. And the fact of the matter is an African American male who owns his own business we have to go through these things a lot. I mean, a lot of our counterparts who are going for business deals, they have sort of a step ahead of us because of some of the things that people like these two individuals think. I think that if it was reversed, if we have an African-American mayor, say Atlanta or DeKalb County CEO or Clayton County, Fulton County, basically said we don't want to hire someone because they're white, I think Phil would probably be demanding that person to apologize.
Well,
right?
I would too. Rob Pitts even said in Fulton County, we need to hire more white people.
Yeah, and so I think that, am I surprised? No, because I do think that racism still exists in this country. But I do think I want all of the white leaders who I know are good people who are not racist to really speak up and speak out against this type of behavior in this county.
And that's certainly what happened there. Was a member of city council who reported the conversation and got the ball rolling and also called for their resignation.
Possibly more to come on this issue. Well, coming up, Howard University invites former Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed to give its commencement speech. That's next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Howard University chose alum and former Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed as their commencement speaker this year. Reed said he was excited to go back home, but not everyone was pleased with the decision because of the ongoing federal corruption probe. Theron, want to get your take on this. I mean, could they not have waited and just to see how this all plays out? I mean, I think it's the timing. I think this was a poor decision.
Well, so this is the thing. I am fortunate to be a trustee member on Clark Atlanta University's board, and every time there's a commencement speaker selected, students have something to say. Matter of fact, I went back and visited with my old president, Dr. Thomas Cole, and I asked him, I said, well, I was a little radical in school, but, did I ever go to the point where make you think that I may want to protest a commencement speaker?
You weren't on Facebook either.
I went on Facebook either. I think what you're seeing here, Lori, is that you have a group of students all across the country, not just at Howard, who are just activists and who are using their First Amendment right. But I would say this, I don't think you can meet many Howard University alums that love Howard more than former Mayor Kasim Reed. I mean, this is a young man who I think was HJ president there, who was one of the youngest members of the board. The president asked him to speak, and so I think that this is going to fuel him to go and give a really good speech. This is a way for him to go back to his alma mater and really talk to these young people who probably a lot of them want to follow in his political footsteps. But you're right, the investigation is ongoing. He has not been indicted. He has not been implicated in any of the actions as this investigation continues. And so I think you have a bunch of students who are just active and they want to just push back. But I think that it's going to fuel him, and I think he's going to give a good speech.
Well, I think it's not just students, and he is a good speaker.
Right.
But Phil, we haven't heard from Mayor Reed on all of these allegations and these accusations, and here he is, giving a speech up at Howard University.
Well, I think it's tone deaf, and the president should have just stepped up and said, there are many fine African-American role models in business and all sectors of life, and it would have been a better choice. Because, I mean, think about it, 8 years under Kasim Reed. Just take one issue, the transparency issue. I mean, all of you have said here on the panel that Keisha Lance Bottoms and numerous had to clean up the mess just in that one area. Let's not talk about bribery and corruption and everything else. So it's sad. I think this has actually united a lot of whites and blacks who were thinking this is really tone deaf on this.
Yeah, but I would say this real quick. As someone, again, who attended HBCU, who's on the board of HBCU, one of the things that we do feel, and you didn't go to HBCU, so you probably didn't know this, is that we embrace our own. And at a time where, he's going through an investigation, I'm sure that the Howard University president and the board did their own investigations, really to ask some tough questions to Kasim Reed. And so this is a time to not kick a man when he may or may not be down, to bring him back to his alma mater where he said he wants to go home.
That's
I think
a good argument.
A good gesture
I don't know,
and
I certainly wouldn't embrace a fellow white who was involved in a lot of corruption allegations. I understand what you're saying, but I mean, I think you got to be careful who you embrace.
Well, we have a lot of racial issues. I want to get to this one. A UGA grad student is cleared of accusations he falsified his grad school application. And Theron, this is the same grad student in the middle of a controversy for saying white people may have to die for black communities to be made whole.
Yeah, and so the case was dropped in Chicago, and some charges were dropped, and I think most recently some charges were dropped against him here. And this is another clear-cut situation where he did make some very controversial remarks, was basically condemned. I think donors stopped giving to the University of Georgia because of the comments. UGA came out with a statement that they thought was right. So I think now, since the charges have been dropped in the case in Chicago, and now it looks like some charges have been dropped in the case here in Georgia, I think that this young man should go on a pathway to being vindicated.
Well,
Alexis, go ahead, weigh in.
Well, I was just going to say that they suggested that he was fomenting violence against white people, but that wasn't what he meant at all. I mean, this is something that Oprah Winfrey has said, that people have to age out of racism because some people cannot change and evolve, and so they just have to wait for them to die, and then that will make things better for everybody.
Well, Phil, you made this professor a loser.
Well, he is a
winners
loser.
And losers.
Rami Osei Frimpong. He's actually a teaching assistant, just for viewers that may not fully realize what we're talking about, over at the University of Georgia. There's really two incidents here. Theron's talking about a student panel that was just judging on whether he had falsified a document to get into Georgia. You can agree or disagree with that, but the worst thing is, and it's not just one tweet. I mean, one tweet is killing white people isn't genocide, it's killing white people. What? This is hateful. This is not controversial. This is hateful. And so there's still a decision that will have to be made by the University of Georgia president as to what to do with him for this. It's a debate, Lori, between speech versus behavior. Should an institution tolerate this type of behavior, which goes against the inclusion and tolerance that universities preach?
But he's not killing anybody.
The Georgia, well, it's hateful rhetoric. You would condemn it if a white supremacist said the reverse. The Board of Regents is going to meet this week, and I think this will be a topic. How do we handle speech versus the behavior of an employee? You've heard me say they're far tougher on students in the university system that say stupid or hateful things than they are staff. And I think they got to get the policy right.
I think we can agree. I mean, just us talking about this, and we're a show that don't want to make everything about race. But when you have white people saying things about black people, you have black people saying things about white people. That's just where our country is right now. And I think it's left up to black people and white people to stand up against that type of racist behavior.
Amen.
And on that note, we are going to come back with winners and losers up next.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Alexis, we are going to start with you this week.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to congratulate Joyce Lowenstein. I hope it's Lowenstein or Lowenstein. She graduated from Georgia State University at the age of 93.
Tender age of 93.
Wonderful,
Huh?
wonderful.
I'll check her off my list.
That's right, so exciting. And also, Washington Park celebrates 100 years this weekend with a jazz concert and other activities. And I'm talking about Booker T. Washington Park, which is exciting. And then finally, Emma Darnell passed this week, and so she will be remembered as one of the stalwarts defending the defenseless and looking out for the rights of seniors particularly, and also as the architect of the Minority Enterprise business development program under Maynard Jackson that gave rise to the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport and many millionaires of color.
Covered a lot of Fulton County commissions covering Emma Darnell.
Her latest stint.
All right, Phil.
I've got a winner. It's American Legion Post 29 over in Marietta. I've got my friends over there who are doing a 5K Memorial Veterans Run. It's going to be May 25th. Check out the website there at Post 29. And they also have a Banks and Shane concert at the Earl Smith Theater in Marietta. And that's going to raise money for a lot of charities, including the Shepherd's Men folks.
Nice, very nice.
And I do have a loser. Brace yourself, Alexis and Theron, but it's going to be Stacey Abrams, the defeated governor's candidate from last year. I think it's a terrible thing for this country. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever, when you refuse to concede and then say, I'm not going to ever concede because the system is all wrong and the system needs to change. That's just going to dynamite the foundation of probably a country that's has done 220 years of trying to be a good country. It's imperfect.
Come on, stop.
It's terrible. Concede. You win and you lose some.
Theron, we got 2 minutes, so you can go today.
All right, well, we almost got through one show without discussing Stacey Abrams. But Phil
and our
would let
Facebook viewers will weigh in on
know.
this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, couple winners. Definitely want to echo Alexis, what she said. Fulton County Commissioner Emma Darnell was a exemplar in this county. Was here for 2 decades, just leading the county, and she watched the show, and she's definitely going to be missed. Fought for seniors, fought for a lot of people in Fulton County. Secondly, want to give Rob Pitts, the chairman of Fulton County, shout out as well. He had a State of County speech this week, and his phrase throughout the whole speech, Phil and Alexis and Lori, was, Fulton County is a big deal, and so he had a really good PowerPoint presentation about all the great things that Fulton County is doing. Marshall Taggart is another winner. He's going on to be the Montgomery Regional Airport Executive Director, leaving DeKalb Peachtree. And then also Mo Diggs did a wonderful story about an officer named Peter Diaz at the Atlanta airport. There was a gentleman who had a knife, and a lot of officers surrounded him, but Officer Diaz very calmly convinced the man to calm down, not do anything, while one of his fellow officers came behind the man and tased him. So they peacefully apprehended this guy. So I want to give a big shout out to Officer Diaz. And then lastly, my loser is definitely Carolyn Meadows, the NRA president.
All right, thank you. And I've got a winner this week, Thomas Montreux. He's a Brookwood High School senior in Gwinnett County, and he lost his mom on Monday night to cancer. Well, the very next day, he went out on the tennis court to help Brookwood win the state championship. So he says he did it with the help of his mom, and I'll bet his mom is smiling down, so proud of him. So a big shout out. The winners this week are all of the moms, whether they're here or like my mom watching down on us. So happy Mother's Day, and we will see you next week.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
Happy Mother's Day, right.
Get that in.
I forgot. Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.